Hi everyone, this is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn, and together with chesslecture.com I'd like to welcome you to today's lecture. Today I want to share with you a game that I really enjoyed playing. It's a miniature against a Grandmaster-elect, Justin Sarkar. As you probably know, he's a chess player from New York. And this game happened at a recent strong tournament, Reykjavik Open, where I didn't quite know which opening to play. And for the first time in my life, I played a new opening, Queen's Gambit Accepted. And I want you guys to see the game. So d4, d5, c4, and I simply take the pawn. So when you play a new opening like that, right, you kind of tell your opponent, well, maybe you've got an idea or novelty or something up your sleeve. And I have to say that Justin is one of those chess players who doesn't back down from a fight, which makes him a very good chess player, but at the same time, sometimes he could be target of some preparation. So a lot of players, when faced with an opening they didn't expect, may play e3, or knight f3 followed by e3, and the game gets a little bit dry and boring, and maybe even we get some endgame. But Justin doesn't back down from a fight. e4 is a very principled approach, and he simply wants to take the pawn, maintain full center, and say, I'm fighting for the advantage. So what do you think was my idea? Well, there's this new trend, this new idea for black, that starts with this move b5. Knight a4, c6, knight c3, a6. So it looks as though black has defended the pawn on b5, but obviously you guys can calculate and see that black did not really. The rook is unprotected, white can take twice on b5. So that's exactly what Justin does. Isn't that a free pawn? And I said, yep, you have the free pawn, but I'm going to give you the exchange now. A takes B. Wow, what a shocker. But I have to say, this is not my home cooking. I did not come up with this idea. There were actually a number of Grandmaster games, including games by Nakamura, that showed that this is quite a dangerous variation. Rook takes, bishop b7, rook a1. Now, I should mention that a couple rounds early in the same exact tournament, Mr. Fire on board himself, Alexei Shirov, played with white rook a2, which is a really clever move if you know what you're doing, but for most of us, there's not much difference, rook a1 and rook a2, against Dutch international master Robert Ries. And the game was a fight-and draw. So I kind of used that game as my preparation, and the ideas you will see are very similar to the Shirov-Ries game. So, alright, so Justin plays more logical rook a1, and a lot of you guys will probably take the pawn, right? When you're down material, it's a human tendency to gain it back in some way, shape, or form. But the theme of this variation is to give away material for rapid development. So that's why I play the move e6, and this is the main move. Notice this pawn is still under attack. More importantly, this idea is going to be a big headache, and the king gets vulnerable. So f3. f3 is justified in a sense that you are holding on to material, trying to prove that black strategy is total garbage. Well, I don't stop, and I play f5. Exclaim. Believe it or not, this is the best move. Justin says, alright, thanks for the other free pawn. And once again, I don't look back at material, knight c6. This is almost Tal-like style. This whole variation, you know, should be called Tal variation if, of course, Tal played it, but this was developed after his time. But the ideas are the same. These guys are pretty much standing on their initial squares. We already have two minor pieces developed, and I'm about to get third minor piece into the game, and Justin simply defends his central pawn, notice that I don't stop and take the pawn. I get my third piece in the game. So I actually do want to take with the knight, put pressure on this guy, bishop b4, and be quite happy. So the move that I anticipated was bishop g5. This is exactly the move that was played by Shirov a couple rounds earlier, but remember the rook was on a2, which is a subtle difference in some lines, but in the bigger picture it doesn't really make a difference. h6, bishop h4, queen d7, takes. And I thought that if we get this position, it's really double-edged and it's quite difficult for white to castle. This guy's coming here, or maybe here. This is check, castle, and the extra material doesn't really feel like much because the rooks are not really in the game. Yes, this rook is somewhat in the game, but no entry squares, and the h1 rook is totally out of the game. But Justin actually shocked me with his next move. So let's go back. He said, well, I don't believe in your opening. I'm just going to keep taking pawns. Wow. Well, for somebody who is playing this position for the first time in my life, I'm already down in exchange and a whopping 2 pawns down. Well, that's the kind of material that you tend to resign, right, guys? But luckily, I managed to pull myself together and told myself, all right, there's a reason why people play this opening. Think about counterplay, think about development, and attack. So I pulled myself together, I played the best move, knight f5, and now it's actually not easy for him to protect the d pawn. This check is also annoying. And here already I think Justin faltered with bishop f4, allowing me pretty good counterplay. This I think was the more testing try, and here I had a couple options. Knight e5, bishop check, and knight b4. During the game I wasn't sure what to do, but I definitely did not like this check because of bishop d2. And you may say, well, maybe you get some counterplay, but in reality this guy's hanging, so is the bishop. Not so obvious to me. Alright, so what else? This was a pretty interesting idea. Now there's some cool lines if he plays, let's say rook a7, which is a horrible move. And let's just play this self-made idea. So just an idea, right guys? So you see the danger. The king could get mated right in the middle of the board. But I'm not even sure if knight e5 is the best move. To me, during the game, this looked like a very interesting possibility. And now this guy. This guy cannot be taken because of the family fork. And the family fork is coming no matter what. But when you put this position on the engine, it says almost equal. It's a total mess. I'm not going to bore you with details. It's just that these kind of positions are engines are on a totally different planet than humans. But it does feel like black is a little bit easier to play. He can probably play king f2. I can try to activate the bishop, and the game is interesting. Or play knight e2. So let's go back. And it looks like Justin plays a logical move, bishop f4, but somehow there's no harmony in white's position. And he finds himself in trouble. Check, knight blocks, knight c takes d4 to open up the bishop. So now he quickly tries to castle, but he underestimated my next move. Very simple move, guys. Queen to b6. So the lesson here is that material only visibly looks like it's a big trump. In reality, if you can't get the rook into the game, you can't get the king into safety, big problems are happening. So here he played queen d2. Obviously castle into discovered check is not recommended. I castled. Bishop d1. So he's trying to solve his opening problems using this method. I should also mention that this would have been a big no-no. Don't be greedy. That's the lesson because of check and mate. So I hope you guys saw this little tactic. So let's get back to the game. He plays bishop d1. My next move is quite easy. Takes the pawn. And little by little, it actually looks like white is in trouble. I finally got all my pawns back. Yes, I'm still down in exchange, but wide open king, control of the long diagonals, the pin, the rook that is about to play on the open file makes the king really, really vulnerable. And if you really think about it, am I really down in exchange? This rook is supposed to be worth 5 points. Is it really worth 5 points? Probably not. This guy shoots in nowhere. There's no square that's available to the rook. It's basically a bystander. The position is totally, totally lost. So bishop g3, rook d8, bishop f2. I simply play bishop c5. Of course, I could take on d2 and b2, but this is simpler. Queen goes to c2, and I just basically throw everybody at the king. Takes, takes. This is already quite difficult to find a square for the queen. So Justin plays queen b1. This is a picturesque position. This is what happens when you get greedy. Your pieces are in total disarray. Black gets free attack. Every single piece, by the way, is attacking the king. And I found a really cute move. Queen h6. Already being under 5 minutes, Justin couldn't find any defense. He simply let his time run out. But white is totally, totally busted. Just one cool variation. If he castles right into the discovered check, it's actually forced mate. If he tries to bring the queen in, I can do this check. And here I have several wins. I can do this check. I can regroup with this check. And just start collecting material. This guy's not going anywhere. King is still under attack. Game is lost. Wow. So let's get back to the final position once again. Queen h6 is the winning move. With a dual threat, queen h4 and queen e3, the king is completely stuck and the rooks are totally worthless. White can't do anything. So you see, guys, this is very instructive that even at grandmaster level, miniatures like this may happen. Yes, you kind of need a little bit of help from your opponent because Justin played very principled chess and started grabbing material, but then he allowed a little bit too much counterplay, didn't have time to castle, and that's it. He found himself at a totally lost game. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little miniature. Maybe you get to use some of these ideas in your own games and have fun. This is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn for chesslecture.com. Goodbye.